Disclaimer: this video is being made during the combine. The only positions that have done their drills are running backs, offensive linemen, and special teams. Therefore, I don't know the results of the other players. Don't hate on me if one of the other positions, if there's a player whose stock goes super high up or super far down. What's going on, everyone? Mr. Octagonal here. Now today, with the 8th episode of our 3 Minutes on the Clock podcast. I appreciate all the support I've gotten so far in this series. Today we have another 2-round mock draft with trades, so that'll probably get me a lot of hate, but I think all of the trades are very fair. I've worked harder on this mock draft than the previous ones. I'm not saying that I didn't work hard on the previous ones, but I worked extra hard on this one, so I hope you all enjoy. The first pick, the Arizona Cardinals select Nick Bosa, edge rusher, Ohio State. Bosa is not my number one player in this draft class. However, I think he's the most complete and pro-ready player in this draft class. The Cardinals are getting a phenomenal player who should test pretty well at the combine. Him and Chandler Jones will create a great pass-rushing duo. If I was the Cardinals, I'd trade down at pick 8 or 9 and draft Ed Oliver. I like Oliver more as a prospect than Bosa. However, I don't think the Cardinals are going to do that. They could trade down to pick 4 or 5, or they could even draft Kyler Murray here at number 1, and there are a lot of rumors that they might do that. However, that's such a huge gamble, and they just drafted a quarterback in Josh Rosen last year, so I think they're going to go with Bosa. Not saying I'm particularly high on Rosen. I wasn't huge on him last year out of UCLA, and he didn't really show a lot of flashes as a rookie, but that's also what I said about Mitchell Trubisky, and he had a great second year, so who knows. With the second pick, the San Francisco 49ers select Josh Allen, edge rusher, Kentucky. Allen is a very versatile player. You can put him at edge rusher. You can have his hand in or out of the dirt. He can also play middle linebacker, as he's pretty competent in coverage. He had a lot of production this year for the Wildcats, and I had the Niners taking him once again. The Niners have some talent in their front seven. Fred Warner had a good year at middle linebacker. DeForest Buckner's a superstar inside at DT. And then you have Eric Armstead and Solomon Thomas. Thomas played better as the season gone along, as the Niners are starting to figure out how to use him better. And then Armstead entering his 5th season, I believe. He's sort of a giant question mark. Not really sure if the Niners are going to bring him back after next year, which I'm pretty sure that's when his contract runs out. I'm pretty sure they gave him a 5th-year team option. And Allen had such a phenomenal year getting to a quarterback for Kentucky. With the third pick, the New York Jets select Quinnen Williams, defensive tackle, Alabama. There are a lot of rumors that the Jets want to trade out of this selection. However, pairing him with Leonard Williams in the interior of their defensive line is too scary to pass up. As you can see, this is the same top 3 I've had now for 3 straight mock drafts. I just think it makes a ton of sense. I think the Jets could trade out of it, but if they don't, I think this will be the top 3. And we have ourselves a trade. The Jacksonville Jaguars are moving up from pick 7 to pick 4, as the Oakland Raiders will be moving down. The Raiders get the 7th pick, the 38th pick, which is the Jaguars' 2nd rounder, and then the Jaguars' 2nd rounder next year. And then Jacksonville will also be getting a 6th next year. And with this selection, the Jaguars select Kyler Murray, quarterback, Oklahoma, over Dwayne Haskins. We saw his measurements. He's 5'10", 207 pounds. And I think that will raise his stock. He won't be participating in any drills, unfortunately. I know we all wanted to see his 40-yard dash. Personally, I think it being the 4.33, 4.34 range, which is obviously blazing fast. That'd be faster than any of the running backs, as the fastest 40 for running backs yesterday was Mike Weber, who ran, I believe, a 4.39. Murray is a very explosive athlete, and while the Raiders could pick him as well, it'd be very fun to have him in the same city as the Oakland A's. I think the Raiders will trade out of it. I still think they believe Carr is their franchise quarterback. And the Jaguars obviously need a quarterback, as Blake Bortles is no longer the guy. They could sign Nick Foles, and I know they are the favorite. But my gut is telling me that the Giants are going to pick up Nick Foles. And the Jaguars, since they'll need a quarterback, they'll go with the explosive Kyler Murray. He's not quite as good of a passer as Dwayne Haskins. However, he's a very good playmaker. I would say he's a little bit better of a prospect than Lamar Jackson last year. They do have some similarities. I just think Murray is a tad bit better passer. The 5th pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Jonah Williams, offensive lineman, Alabama. The Bucs don't desperately need offensive linemen, but they could use some players, as Ali Marpet has sort of transitioned from right guard to left guard, and then the rest of the offensive line, other than center, which is Ryan Jensen, who the Bucs paid a ton of money to, and Jonah Williams isn't really a center. Left tackle, you have Donovan Smith, consistent starter, but inconsistent football player, and he's a free agent. At right tackle, you have DeMar Dotson, who's a good player, but he's getting up there. And then I have no clue who they have at right guard. Jonah Williams can play all three of those positions, and I expect him to be a starter day one. I don't see him starting at right tackle, since I think DeMar Dotson will be back next year. However, right guard, who knows who they have? Is it Caleb Sweezy? I know that's totally wrong. I feel like his name is Caleb, who their right guard is. And then Donovan Smith they could bring back. However, he's just such an inconsistent player that I don't see them paying him good money. And I think this pick makes a ton of sense for Tampa Bay. With the 6th pick, the New York Giants select Cody Ford, offensive lineman from Oklahoma. So the top 6 is exactly the same, other than the Jaguars trading up and getting Kyler Murray for my last mock. Ford, like Williams, is a very versatile player. Ford will likely play right tackle. He can play right tackle as well as right guard. The Giants can use him in either position. Jamon Brown is currently their right tackle, right guard, who's a solid player. Right tackle is Chad Wheeler, who is worse than Jamon Brown, so I assume that's where Ford will play. And Ford played mostly right tackle for the Sooners, so I think that pick makes a ton of sense. I like Ford's athleticism and his versatility, and it's pretty much a toss-up who's better between him and Jonah Williams. My gut, I would say right now, is telling me Cody Ford, but you could go either way. And then with the 7th pick, the Oakland Raiders select Devin White, middle linebacker from LSU. The Raiders have the worst linebacking core in the NFL. White is a very athletic, very explosive 3-down linebacker, and the Raiders need a playmaker there, as I'm pretty sure their linebackers combined for 0 sacks, 0 interceptions, 0 fumble forces, and 0 fumble recoveries this past season. I think Devin White can rack up every single one of those stats. And we have ourselves another trade. The Dolphins are going to be moving up 5 spots from 13 to 8. The Lions will be moving down. Now, I know Denver is absolutely in the market for a quarterback. I know John Elway loves Drew Lock. However, if Dwayne Haskins is on the board, that's kind of hard to pass up. And I don't know if the Dolphins want to give a ton of assets to the team right before Denver, which is Buffalo, since the Dolphins and the Bills are in the same division. So the next best thing is here at 8 with the Detroit Lions. I have the Lions getting pick 13, 48, which is the Dolphins' second, and a 2023 round pick. As a Lions fan, I'd be pretty happy if we did this. I think this is a fair trade for both sides. And the Dolphins getting Dwayne Haskins. Haskins is my number 1 quarterback in this draft class. He's not great outside the pocket. However, the Dolphins do have a pretty solid O-line. And I think the Dolphins need to bring back Jawan James, because that would make Haskins' life a whole lot easier. Haskins is a very good passer. He is a pretty strong arm, very accurate. He's somewhat mobile. He's somewhat athletic. Obviously not the explosive athlete that Kyler Murray is. However, he's a more polished passer, and I think he will start day 1 ahead of Ryan Tannehill. With the 9th pick, the Buffalo Bills select Ed Oliver, defensive tackle from Buffalo. They could get Josh Allen weapons. However, Oliver is such a dominant presence in the interior of Houston's defensive line. Undersized, but he's a super athlete. Reminds me a lot of Aaron Donald coming out of college, as they're both undersized, extremely athletic, and good run stoppers. Aaron Donald was not a phenomenal pass rusher coming out of college. He looked better at rushing the passer than Ed Oliver did, but he wasn't phenomenal at it. And now, this year, he just racked up 20.5 sacks. He was a better pass rusher than anyone in the league. And I think Ed Oliver has a good chance to get to the quarterback as well. Maybe not 20.5 sacks, but I think he will be effective at it. Kyle Williams, the longtime Bill, did just retire, and they need a new interior presence, and that can be Ed Oliver, who probably will be better than Kyle Williams ever was. With the 10th pick, the Denver Broncos select Drew Lock, quarterback from Missouri. We know John Elway really likes this kid, and while they did just trade for Joe Flacco, he's not the long-term answer. They sort of regret not investing in a quarterback last year. However, they did still have a very good draft. I don't think they regret picking Bradley Chubb at 5, but maybe in the 2nd or 3rd round they probably could have gotten someone who would have been better than Cortland Sutton or Royce Freeman. Locke is a pretty solid passer all around. He's not quite as good as Haskins when it comes to it. However, he's pretty accurate, and he has a solid arm. He's a very well-rounded player. He doesn't do anything great, but he also doesn't do anything horrible, which is, I think, what the Broncos need at quarterback. A well-rounded player, since the rest of their team is pretty talented, and I think this could be where Locke ends up. With the 11th pick, the Cincinnati Bengals select Jawan Taylor, offensive tackle from Florida. The Bengals need to improve their offensive line. The Cedric Obuhe pick didn't work out. I was thinking of Clint Bowling, who was like the Bengals' only good O-lineman. The Jake Fisher pick didn't work out. The Billy Price pick might work out. But the Bengals need themselves a new tackle, and Jawan Taylor can slide right into right tackle. Very agile player. He is somewhat raw, not quite as finished of a product than someone like Greg Little, but I think this is a good pick for Cincinnati, taking a risk on a high flyer in Jawan Taylor. With the 12th pick, the Green Bay Packers select Clelin Ferrell, edge rusher, Clemson. That's actually how you pronounce his last name, as Ferrell has had a ton of college production for the Clemson Tigers. He is a very good pass rusher, not particularly a super high ceiling, and I don't think he will be an all-star at the Combine. However, he does have a nice floor, and I'm sure he will be a very serviceable player in the league. The Packers need an edge rusher. I think I've had him going with one in the first round in every single mock draft, as they absolutely need one. Clay Matthews probably won't be back next year. Nick Perry declining. Mike Daniels more of a run stopper. Their only edge rusher who has upside is Kyril Fackrell, who got 10.5 sacks last year. However, that could be a fluke. And even if it's not, the Packers do need another one. And Ferrell at 12 is phenomenal value. I've had him going in the top 6 in every single one of my mock drafts. And I think this is a really good pick for Green Bay. With the 13th pick, the Detroit Lions select Greedy Williams, cornerback from LSU. I think the Lions have bigger needs on defense rather than secondary, as they did have 2 Pro Bowlers in the secondary, Darius Slay and Mr. Quandre Diggs. But the Lions do need another corner with Darius Slay, and Greedy Williams is the best in this draft class. He's a long, lean corner, around 6'2". Darius Slay is more of a ball hawker, gets the interceptions, and Greedy Williams can be the corner who you don't want to throw the ball to because he's covering receivers like blankets, which I think will give Darius Slay more and more opportunities to be great, and I think Slay will complement Greedy very well too, and overall I think this could be a really nice secondary tandem at cornerback for the Lions. With 14th pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Montez Sweat, edge rusher at Mississippi State. The Falcons could go D-tackle, could go offensive line. However, they could use an edge rusher as well, and Montez Sweat is the best one on the board. He's had a very solid career with Mississippi State. He also had a really good Senior Bowl, and I think that could propel the Falcons to take him here. I think I've had him going to the Packers at 12 2 times in a row, but since Ferrell's on the board, I think that's a better pick for them, as him and Takk McKinley would be a really nice edge rushing duo in Atlanta. Huge fan of McKinley's game. I think he's going to have a great year this year, and I think Montez Sweat can too. With the 15th pick, the Washington Redskins select Daniel Jones, quarterback, Duke. Last time I had Kyler Murray falling to 15, but him and Locke are on the board. Jones is the only first-round projected quarterback left, and that will be the pick. Jones is a pretty accurate quarterback with a pretty nice throwing motion, pretty good arm as well. He's a solid athlete, and he's a little bit more raw than Drew Lock. However, he is a little bit more consistent in college. He had a really nice bowl game against Temple. I think he's going to test pretty well at the Combine. And Alex Smith, he's not going to play next year most likely. Don't know if he will ever play another game in the league again. The Redskins need to invest in their long-term quarterback. With the 16th pick, the Carolina Panthers select Rashawn Gary, defensive lineman from Michigan. Gary's a very nice hybrid player. Sort of reminds me of Solomon Thomas coming out of Stanford a few years ago. Doesn't really rack up the box score stats. However, still a very well-rounded player, pretty athletic. Can play defensive tackle as well as edge rusher. I view Rashawn Gary more as an oversized edge rusher rather than defensive tackle, which is where Solomon Thomas has flourished. So I think they will be somewhat different players in the league. The Panthers could use help on their defensive line, as Julius Peppers, after probably playing around 60 years in the league, has finally called it quits. Mario Addison isn't particularly great either, and I think value-wise this is a solid pick. I know a lot of people in my comment section don't like Gary, but that's because he got double-teamed all of last year, which is what I call the Desmond King rule. Of course, Desmond King coming out of Iowa. Could have been a first-round pick as a junior. However, he stayed as a senior. No quarterback threw the ball near him, and because of that, his stock fell to the 5th round where the Chargers got him. And after 2 seasons, he is now a first-team All-Pro. So I don't think the Chargers are regretting that, and he should have been a pick in the top 10 or 15. With the 17th pick, the Browns select Christian Wilkins, defensive tackle, Clemson. Wilkins has been a dominant interior for Clemson for a number of years. The Browns have talent on their defensive line. Myles Garrett is great. Larry Ogunjobi is great, but they need another defensive tackle alongside Ogunjobi, and Christian Wilkins is a really good player. Like his teammate Clelin Ferrell, I don't think Wilkins, I don't think he has a crazy ceiling, but I think he has a nice floor, and the Browns don't need to go boom or bust in this scenario. The 18th pick, the Minnesota Vikings select DeAndre Baker, cornerback, Georgia. This is the first time in any of my mock drafts with any pick the Vikings don't take an offensive lineman, and it's a cornerback. Don't they take a cornerback every single year in the first round, it seems like? Well, yes, they do. Vikings fans, I know, are questioning this pick, but hear me out. The Vikings are not in a great position cap space-wise, and there are a lot of rumors that Xavier Rhodes could be traded, as he is making a lot of money. I could see the Vikings getting a late first-round pick for him, and if he's gone, which I have a feeling he will, the Vikings need to get a new corner, and they're going to go with DeAndre Baker. Baker won the Jim Thorpe Award, which is the best defensive back in college football. He had a phenomenal year for the Georgia Bulldogs, and him alongside Mike Hughes, I think could be a nice cornerback tandem. Mackenzie Alexander starting to show flashes, and Trey Waynes is a pretty decent player as well. I could also see the Vikings trading Waynes because he does need a new contract soon. I don't think they want to pay him top-tier money, and I think a cornerback group of DeAndre Baker, Mike Hughes, and if he develops Mackenzie Alexander, could be really nice for Minnesota. They could also trade Alexander as he's nearing a contract year 2. So assuming Waynes or Alexander will be gone, then Baker will get himself a nice role. But Mike Zimmer, the head coach, doesn't like to play his rookies a lot. So I think the Vikings' main cornerbacks this year will be Waynes, Hughes, and Alexander. DeAndre Baker will get some reps, but next year, when he's a sophomore, I think he's going to be really good. With the 19th pick, the Tennessee Titans select Ja'Kai Polite, edge rusher, Florida. This is the same pick I had in my last mock draft. Polite is very athletic. This was his only real good year of tape for the Gators, but he was phenomenal at getting to the quarterback. A little bit inconsistent at times, but he had a really good season. Him and Harold Landry would create a nice duo. With the 20th pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select T.J. Hawkinson, tight end from Iowa. He's going to Pittsburgh. Hawkinson is a very well-rounded player, and I could see him going higher. I grade Noah Fant as a better prospect than him. However, Hawkinson's a very well-rounded player, good receiver, good run blocker, and I expect him to do well in the combine. Tight end isn't the Steelers' biggest need, but with Hawkinson on the board, it's a pretty solid selection. With the 21st pick, the Seattle Seahawks select Brian Burns, edge rusher, Florida State. Burns is a very well-rounded player, and the Seahawks could use an edge rusher. I know they have bigger needs, but I've had them going with an edge rusher in pretty much every mock. As Frank Clark is a free agent, they're going to have to pay him top-tier money. I'd be surprised if they let him go, as he's such a good player, but they need a complement for him. And I think this is pretty solid value at 21 to go ahead and pick Burns. With a 22nd pick, the Baltimore Ravens select DK Metcalf, wide receiver, Ole Miss. Metcalf very well could go higher. However, not a lot of the teams in the teens really need receivers, or at least they have bigger needs than receiver. Metcalf is someone who I think will have a phenomenal combine. He repped 27 bench press reps, which is tied for first among receivers with N'Keal Harry. He, despite his gigantic size, 6'3", around 230 pounds, which is very impressive, he's going to run a really nice 40-yard dash, probably somewhere in the 4.4s. And that, along with his jump ball ability, his ability to go upstairs where grandma hides the cookies, a big catch radius, I think could be really good for Lamar Jackson. Metcalf has so much potential, but he also has bust potential as well. With the 23rd pick, the Houston Texans select Elgton Jenkins, center from Mississippi State. I have Jenkins now going ahead of Greg Little, Dalton Risner, Garrett Bradbury, and a bunch of offensive linemen who most people think will go before Jenkins. But Jenkins is a very versatile player, pretty solid combine yesterday. The Texans need anything they can get on their offensive line, and Jenkins can play pretty much any position, which is good, because the Texans can play him wherever they think he fits best, since pretty much every position that they have there are holes. With the 24th pick, the Oakland Raiders select Nasir Adderley, safety from Delaware. I have him going ahead of Deontay Thompson because I think Adderley's going to have an insane combine. Very curious to see what his vertical and broad jump are, as well as his 40-yard dash. Super athlete, pretty well-rounded player for the Blue Hens in coverage and in the run game. Not quite as well-rounded as Deontay Thompson, but he has so much upside, and I think the Raiders are going to take a gamble and go with Adderley. We have ourselves another trade as the Kansas City Chiefs are sitting there at 29 watching Deontay Thompson fall. They call up the Philadelphia Eagles and know they have to make a move, so the Chiefs will be trading up 4 selections. They will also be getting the Eagles' 5th round pick. The Eagles will be getting pick 29 as well as the Chiefs' 3rd round pick, and the Chiefs go ahead and select Deontay Thompson. I would say he's a little bit more of a free safety than a strong safety, and I think the Texans could use a free safety more. As Eric Berry, I classify him as a strong safety, but I think both of these players could play at either safety position. Berry's getting older anyway, and he's showing signs of regression. He's also had a lot of trouble staying on the field with injuries, and with that, the Chiefs go with one of the best defensive players on the board in Thompson. Very well-rounded player. I expect him to be really good in the league. Just don't know about his upside. He doesn't quite have the upside that Nasir Adderley does, but the Chiefs are so talented that I don't think they need to take a gamble. While their defense isn't the most talented, their team as a whole is, and getting a guaranteed good player I think makes sense at this spot. With the 26th pick, the Indianapolis Colts select Marquise Hollywood Brown, wide receiver, Oklahoma. So the cousin of Antonio Brown, who hint hint will not be on the Steelers by the end of this video, is headed to Indianapolis. Brown is a burner, would run a 4.3, flat probably in that area. Unfortunately, he's not healthy for the combine, so we won't get to see exactly what his 40-yard dash was, as he is a burner, deep threat, big play guy for the past few years for Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. Him and T.Y. Hilton should complement each other very well, and I think that'd be really fun for Andrew Luck to have 2 guys who he could launch bombs to. This pick could be N'Keal Harry, who's a little bit more well-rounded. However, I think Harry's 40-yard dash time will sort of scare off a few teams. I expect it to be in the 4.6s, which isn't great. It isn't terrible, but it's also not what you ideally look for. With the 27th pick, the Oakland Raiders select Garrett Bradbury, center, North Carolina State. Bradbury had a phenomenal combine yesterday. He did really well to improve his stock. And while the Raiders have Rodney Hudson, who is one of the best centers in football, he has a big cap hit, and he's getting older. So he's a player who I think the Raiders could look to trade, maybe get a 4th-round pick out of him. I think that's fair value for Rodney Hudson, as I don't know if the Raiders want to pay that much money into someone who's they're not going to invest in long-term, rather than Bradbury, who was excellent during the combine and should continue to rise his stock. With the 28th pick, the Los Angeles Chargers select Jerry Tillery, defensive tackle from Notre Dame. I've had the Chargers going with a defensive tackle in the 1st round in every single mock draft. I think it makes a ton of sense. A defensive tackle gives less attention to Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram, who can get to the quarterback easier. And Tillery had a really good year for Notre Dame, improving his stock, solid run stopper, and overall really good player. With the 29th pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Greg Little, offensive tackle, Ole Miss. So the Eagles got to trade down, get themselves a 3rd-round pick, and somehow Greg Little happens to fall into their laps here at pick 29. Phenomenal value for the Philadelphia Eagles. Jason Peters is a Pro Bowl caliber tackle, but he can't stay healthy, and he's on his last legs. He hasn't officially announced retirement yet, but it could happen, and if he does, Little can step in there right away. I think he's a very productive player now. I think right now he's better than Jawan Taylor. However, he doesn't have the upside, not quite the athlete that Taylor is. But overall, Greg Little is a really solid prospect, and this is a home run 1st round for the Philadelphia Eagles. With the 30th pick, the Green Bay Packers select Noah Fant, tight end, Iowa. As a Lions fan, Cleveland Ferrell and Noah Fant, that scares me to death. I love both of these prospects, especially Fant, who's my number 1 tight end in the class. He's super athletic. I'm very curious to see what his vertical and broad jump are, and I think he's going to have a phenomenal combine. Reminds me a lot of Evan Engram coming out of college. Tight end build, but a wide receiver skill set. Like Engram, Noah Fant is not a great blocker, but he's a really good vertical threat and should run his 40 probably in the 4.5s, maybe the 4.4s. Evan Engram ran a 4.42. Don't know if Fant will be that fast, but we'll see. With the 31st pick, the Los Angeles Rams select Jalen Ferguson, edge rusher, Louisiana Tech. The same pick I had in my last mock draft. Ferguson, super productive player all 4 years for Louisiana Tech. Rams could use help on the edge, as Aaron Donald and Michael Brocker is solid at getting to the quarterback, but they're not necessarily edge rusher builds. Samson Ekubun is a player who I really like. However, on the other side is Dante Fowler, who's a free agent. He was not great in the Super Bowl. He had a few costly penalties, and someone who I don't think the Rams are going to bring back. So I could see them going with Ferguson. And then with the 32nd pick, the New England Patriots select A.J. Brown, wide receiver from Ole Miss. So the Patriots will not be getting Antonio Brown, but they'll be getting a different receiver with the last name Brown. AJ is a very solid route runner and a very solid all-around player. This is a very New England Patriot-like pick, and I think Tom Brady's going to have a ton of fun with him. Before we go on to the second round, it is just announced that Noah Fant ran a 4.51 40-yard dash. There you go. That's why he's my number 1 tight end in the class. Anyway, now we are at to round 2 with the 33rd pick. The Arizona Cardinals select Dalton Risner, offensive lineman from Kansas State. Risner is a first-round prospect in my opinion. I really like him. Super versatile. He can play center, he can play guard, he can play tackle, and the Cardinals have a number of holes on their offensive line, so I think this is a really nice pick for them. With the 34th pick, the Indianapolis Colts select Dexter Lawrence, defensive tackle, Clemson. The Colts don't have that many holes on their roster. However, they could use that big guy in their defensive line. Tyquan Lewis had an okay rookie year. Kamoko Toure is more of an edge rusher. So getting a dominant presence like Dexter Lawrence, who should be really good against the run, and he's a pretty decent pass rusher as well. I think this is a nice pick for Indianapolis. And then with the 35th pick, the Oakland Raiders select Andre Dillard, offensive tackle, Washington. Raiders continuing to improve in their offensive line, as they just got Bradbury. Now they're going to go ahead and get Dillard, who had a phenomenal Senior Bowl and a pretty decent combine. Overall, good picks for these 3 teams. Here we go, everyone. Big boy trade is Antonio Brown is headed to the Bay Area to become a San Francisco 49er. I know the teams listed that have shown interest are the Raiders, Redskins, and Titans. However, Antonio Brown seems like he wants to go to the 49ers, and I think he would make a lot of sense for them. They need a star receiver for Jimmy G. As Brown, Marquise Goodwin, and Dante Pettis, that is a scary trio. So the Steelers, I have them getting the Niners' second-round pick, which is this pick 36. And then I have the 2 teams swapping 6th-round picks. So the Steelers get 177 and the Niners get 194. And I have the Steelers getting themselves a new wide receiver in N'Keal Harry from Arizona State. Many people have Harry as their number 1 receiver. However, I have him as the 4th one off the board, as I just don't know if he quite has the upside as the other 3 guys. I think Harry's going to be a really good player in this league, and I think this makes a ton of sense for the Steelers. They don't need another superstar wide receiver per se. They have one in Juju. Getting themselves someone who they know will be good in N'Keal Harry makes sense here. I know a lot of people have him as their number 1 receiver. I think he's probably my number 2 receiver at this point. Not particularly quick, however, he has good hands, not going to drop a lot of passes, and he's a very good route runner, sort of like Antonio Brown coming out of college, just Brown wasn't a 2nd-round pick, he was actually a 6th-round pick, and that obviously became a very good pick for the Steelers, and I think this one can also be a really good pick for them. With the 37th pick, the New York Giants select Devin Bush, inside linebacker from Michigan. The Giants did trade for Alec Ogletree last offseason, who had a really productive year for New York. However, they do run a 3-4, and their other middle linebacker is B.J. Goodson, who's a meh player at best. So the Giants want to get themselves another middle linebacker, and Devin Bush is the best one on the board. Bush is a phenomenal leader. He's a pretty well-rounded player as well. I do think he is a little bit raw. However, as I like to say, the middle linebacker is the quarterback of the defense, and Bush's leadership ability should fit that role perfectly. With the 38th pick, the Oakland Raiders select J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, wide receiver, Stanford. This is the pick that the Raiders got from Jacksonville, with Jacksonville trading up to draft Kyler Murray. J.J. is a very good route runner and a very polished receiver. I think this getting playmakers for Oakland's offense is very important. Yeah, they do need defense, but the best defense is a good offense. So improving your offensive line, improving your receiving core makes a ton of sense for Oakland. And I think Derek Carr will love having Arcega-Whiteside on his team. With the 39th pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Amani Oruwariye, cornerback, Penn State. Oruwariye is a very solid cover corner, really good in press. He is a little bit older, and he's not particularly the biggest. However, he's a physical player. The Bucs have some young talent in corner in Vernon Hargreaves, Carlton Davis, and MJ Stewart. However, none of those guys have really proven themselves yet. Hargreaves is looking more and more like a bust. Yeah, he did have a decent year last year, but he doesn't look great. And I think Oruwariye could be a really nice addition to their secondary. And then with the 40th pick, the Buffalo Bills select Josh Jacobs, running back, Alabama. So we finally see a running back off the board. I could see similar results in running back in the draft, sort of like what we saw in 2013 and 2014, where there were none in the first round. I don't know if I'd call Jacobs first-round talent. I'd say he's fringe first round, as he's not participating in the combine. He was not healthy. Curious to see what he would have ran, maybe mid 4.4s, 4.5s. And LaShawn McCoy not getting any younger. He's starting to regress. The Bills could use themselves a really nice playmaker in the backfield, and that can be Josh Jacobs, who didn't get the most touches in Alabama, but when he had the ball, he was electric. The 41st pick, the Denver Broncos select Irv Smith Jr., tight end from Alabama. Smith is a very well-rounded player, good pass catcher, doesn't drop a lot of passes, solid run blocker, not quite the athlete that Noah Fant is, definitely not that Noah Fant is, and he's not quite as athletic as TJ Hawkinson. However, this is a pretty good value pick for Denver. They don't really have that great tight end. Jeff Heuerman is okay, Jake Butt, meh, and I think it's always good to have good tight ends. The Ravens had a bunch last year for Joe Flacco, and he didn't really use him too much. He wasn't really particularly productive last year until Lamar Jackson hopped in. But I think this pick makes a lot of sense for Denver. Drew Lock does like to throw to his tight end, as Albert Okwuegbunam, I think that's how you say his last name, has been a very good player for Missouri. I'm pretty sure he's staying in school, so that's why I've not talked about him in any of these mock draft videos. With the 42nd pick, the Cincinnati Bengals select Mack Wilson. He is a middle linebacker from Alabama. Wilson is not a particularly explosive athlete, however, he's a pretty good, well-rounded player. Solid in coverage, solid run stopper. The Bengals have to improve their linebacking core. Vontaze Burfict has too many concussions, and the Bengals just don't have a lot of talent at linebacker. And then for the 43rd pick, the Detroit Lions select Zach Allen, edge rusher, Boston College. The Lions need more edge rushers. I don't think Ezekiel Ansah will be back next year, as Damon Harrison, not really a pass rusher. Deshaun Hand, not really a pass rusher. And then Romeo Okwara, he might not be back next year. He's also a restricted free agent. So the Lions need to invest in an edge rusher early, and Zach Allen is a pretty good value pick here at 43. We got ourselves a trade, ladies and gentlemen, as the New York Jets are moving up to pick 44. They will now get a second-round pick, as their normal second-round pick belongs to Indianapolis since they traded up for Darnold last year. This was originally Green Bay's pick. Now Green Bay will get the Jets' third-round pick this year as well as next year. Meanwhile, the Jets will get a second as well as a future fifth. While it doesn't seem likely the Jets will trade up, they need a running back. Bilal Powell's probably not going to be back. Isaiah Crowell's not going to be back. And what about David Montgomery from Iowa State? Very well-rounded player, lots of production for the Cyclones. He didn't really change his stock too much during the combine. At least I don't think his stock will change too much. But he was a huge playmaker for their offense, and one of the main reasons why that their offense was as good as it was. And I think this is a really solid pick for New York. With the 45th pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Chris Lindstrom, guard from Boston College. Falcons need to improve the interior of their offensive line. Their tackle spots with Jake Matthews and Ryan Schrader are solid, even though Schrader's kind of getting up there in age. At center, they have Alex Mack, phenomenal player. getting older. Their guard spots aren't great either, and I think this is pretty decent value for Lindstrom, as I had originally mocked him to 29 to the Eagles. However, with Greg Little on the board, couldn't really pass that up, and then only a few of the teams in between really need offensive linemen. So, yeah, this is why he's falling. With the 46th pick, the Washington Redskins select Kelvin Harmon, wide receiver, North Carolina State. Big-bodied receiver for Daniel Jones. I think these two could be a really nice ACC pairing, as Jamison Crowder might not be back next year. Paul Richardson can't really stay healthy. With the 47th pick, the Carolina Panthers select Martez Ivy, guard from Florida. The Panthers have a decent offensive line. At tackle, they have Taylor Moton, who had a really underrated year. They also have Darrell Williams, who has had trouble staying healthy and is a free agent. But the interior of their offensive line isn't great. They do have Trey Turner, who's good, but outside of that, they don't really have too much, as their center, Ryan Khalil, I'm pretty sure he officially retired, so they need someone else in the interior of their offensive line, and that can be Martez Ivy from Florida. With a 48th pick, the Detroit Lions select Riley Ridley, wide receiver, Georgia. This pick is via the Miami Dolphins in the Dwayne Haskins trade-up, as Riley Ridley is a very pure route runner. I think his stock will rise during the combine. Pretty good hands. He's not insanely explosive like his brother Calvin Ridley. However, he sort of is somewhat similar to Golden Tate, which of course the Lions have had Golden Tate. Good route runner, good hands, not insane with the ball. I think this pick makes a ton of sense for Detroit, getting themselves a playmaker on the offensive side of the ball. The 49th pick, the Cleveland Browns select Paris Campbell, wide receiver, Ohio State. I absolutely love this pick for the Browns. Campbell gets to stay home in Ohio, which when he was interviewed yesterday, he said he'd love to stay in state and play for the Cleveland Browns. I think this would add so much to their offense, getting themselves a dynamic playmaker, super fast. I expect his 40-yard dash to be in the low 4.3s and one of the fastest at this year's combine. You can put him in the backfield. You can line him at receiver, kick returner, punt returner. The Browns can do so much with him on offense. He can be such a phenomenal X factor for that offensive unit, and I think this pick is a home run for Cleveland. With the 50th pick, the Minnesota Vikings select Titus Howard, offensive tackle from Alabama State. Not regular Alabama, Alabama State. As Howard is a very athletic tackle, he had a really good Senior Bowl, and while he is raw, and maybe the Vikings should be focusing on offensive linemen who are actually good now, so Cousins has some time to throw it, I think Howard has star potential and can be a mainstay at offensive tackle for Minnesota. With the 51st pick, the Tennessee Titans select Darrell Williams, offensive guard, Mississippi State. The Titans need to work on the interior of their offensive line. Their tackles with Taylor Lewan and Jack Conklin, check and check. They are both elite. But the rest of their offensive line isn't great. Who do they have, like Quentin Spain, Ben Jones? Yeah, it's not great. With the 52nd pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Joejuan Williams, cornerback from Vanderbilt. Joejuan Williams is a very tall, physical corner. I believe he's around 6'2", and uses his height and his physicality to his advantage. I think cornerback is the biggest need for the Steelers. I've had them going with a corner in the first round in pretty much every single one of my mock drafts. This is the first one I haven't, so they need to get one here in round 2. Williams, as I mentioned, he's tall, physical, pretty solid ball skills, pretty solid in coverage, and is overall really well-rounded player. With the 53rd pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Damian Williams, running back, Alabama. The Eagles need a running back. I have him going with Josh Jacobs in the first round of my last mock, but him and Montgomery are off the board. This pick could be someone like Justice Hill, whose stock I expect to drastically rise, but I think it'll be Williams, more of a consistent player. Bell cow running back for Alabama, pretty powerful, very well-rounded. J.J. probably won't be back. Darren Sproles has bones made of glass. And their running back towards the end of the season was undrafted rookie Josh Adams, who I really liked coming out of Notre Dame. I graded him higher than first-round pick Rashad Penny. But the Eagles need themselves a really good running back. And I believe Philadelphia does have another pick in the second round. So if Harris is a bust, then oh well. With the 54th pick, the Houston Texans select Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, defensive back from Florida. The Texans could use help in their secondary, primarily corner. is they have a bunch of hybrid players, guys like Tyrann Mathieu, who can play both safety and corner. Justin Reed had a really good year. Andre Howell, good player. He survived Hodgkin's lymphoma, so good for him. So Gardner is primarily a safety, however, he's versatile enough to play cornerback, and I think he can. He doesn't have phenomenal straight line speed, and he needs to improve on his coverage. He's somewhat raw, but the Texans secondary does have a lot of talent, so he doesn't need to play right away. Their cornerback group, I think, will change drastically within the next few years. Kareem Jackson's not getting any younger. Jonathan Joseph's not getting any younger. Kevin Johnson didn't really work out, and the Honey Badger is a free agent. Texans happen to have back-to-back picks. However, I had them trading it to the Cincinnati Bengals. In return, I had the Texans getting pick 111, which is the Bengals' 4th-round pick, a 2025, as well as John Ross. The Bengals are looking to shop John Ross, as him and the Bengals both want a fresh start from each other. Obviously, Ross ran a 4.22 40-yard dash, so you know the speed is going to be there. An insane deep threat. He's super raw, and he needs to improve his durability as he's had a lot of trouble staying on the field. However, adding him to that Texans receiving core, along with Will Fuller, who's a very similar player. I don't know if the Texans are looking to pay Will Fuller top receiver money. They also have Keke Coutee, who had a pretty solid rookie year, and obviously DeAndre Hopkins, who I think is the best receiver in the league. So the Bengals will be trading up, and what do? They select Will Grier, quarterback, West Virginia. With Marvin Lewis finally getting fired, there's a new wave of management coming in with Zach Taylor. I assume Taylor, as a quarterback coach, wants his own guy. Andy Dalton's been there for a while, never won a playoff game, so I have them going with Grier, a player who I'm not particularly high on. However, he is a pretty solid athlete. He's going to have a good combine, but he has a wonky throwing motion, and he doesn't have a great arm. Somewhat accurate, and I view him as a 4th-round prospect right now. However, a good combine could improve his stock for me. This is a risky pick, but Andy Dalton's not going to lead you anywhere, so it's kind of worth the risk. The 56th pick, the New England Patriots select Jaquan Johnson, safety, Miami. I've had Johnson going to the Patriots in a number of mock drafts now. I just think it makes a ton of sense. The Patriots love to run with 3 safeties. I'm not saying they had 3 safeties on the field at once, but they love to rotate their safeties. But all of their safeties are getting up there in age. Devin McCourty contemplated retirement. However, he is staying next year, but he is 30 anyway. As Patrick Chung, he's also not getting any younger, and same with Duron Harmon. So it might be time for the Patriots to get another safety in Jaquan Johnson, who can sort of redshirt this year. He can sort of learn the Patriot way and get improvement from the safeties, especially Devin McCourty, as McCourty's more of a coverage guy, whereas Johnson is more of a run stopper, super hard hitter. Johnson needs to work on his coverage, and if he becomes a good cover safety, I think he can be a phenomenal safety for New England, and this will be a home run pick. With the 57th pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Trayvon Mullen, cornerback, Clemson. The Eagles have invested a lot of 2nd and 3rd and 4th round picks the past few years in cornerback, getting guys like Sidney Jones, Rasul Douglas, Avonte Maddox, all of whom have shown flashes. However, the Eagles' cornerbacks were getting so injured last year that they were literally getting guys off the streets to play for them. And Trayvon Mullen is pretty good value here at 57. While it isn't the biggest position of need, they have a number of young developmental players there. None of them are particularly great right now. And I think Mullen, who had a pretty good college football playoff, can be really good right now. With the 58th pick, the Dallas Cowboys select Caleb Wilson, tight end, UCLA. I think his stock is going to rise the next 2 months in the draft and in my opinion, as I'm sort of liking him more and more. He ran a 4.5 flat 40-yard dash just now, and he's sort of like Noah Fant, but just not quite as good. And what I mean by that is they're both super explosive athletes, pretty good receivers in wide receiver builds. Not a great blocker, but I think getting a really good explosive playmaker for Dak could be beneficial. Yes, Jason Witten did announce that he's coming back to the team. Witten's old. He's not going to be a superstar. We don't know how good he's going to be, and he's probably going to retire within the next couple years anyway. So the Cowboys will need a replacement, and Caleb Wilson is a really good player. With the 59th pick, the Indianapolis Colts select Voshon Joseph, middle linebacker from Florida. Darius Leonard isn't necessarily a middle linebacker. Darius Leonard's sort of just a linebacker in general. You can use him in a number of different ways. Pass rushing, run stopping, coverage. He's good at it all. But he's not a prototypical middle linebacker. So that's where Vosean Joseph can come in. He's a pretty solid player for the Florida Gators, and I think the Colts defense will continue to improve with the selection of him and Dexter Lawrence. With the 60th pick, the Los Angeles Chargers select Eric McCoy, center, Texas A&M. McCoy had a really good 40-yard dash, really good combine, very agile player, and the Chargers need to work on their offensive line, so I do like this pick. With the 61st pick, the Kansas City Chiefs select Draymond Jones, defensive tackle from The Ohio State University. Pretty good value pick here at 61. Jones isn't going to light up the box score, however, he creates more opportunities for players like Justin Houston and Chris Jones and Dee Ford if he comes back next year. So I think this pick makes a lot of sense for Kansas City. With the 62nd pick, the New Orleans Saints select Rocky Ya-Sin, cornerback, Temple. The Saints don't really have that many needs, however, I think they could use to get another corner. Marshawn Lattimore is great, but outside of that, they have some okay players, guys like Patrick Robinson, Eli Apple, who are decent. They can play this year, but I know Apple's contract is done after this year. Don't know how much longer Patrick Robinson has, and they will need to pay Marshawn Lattimore in a few years. Obviously, they're going to give him the money, but they need another corner, and they can get Rocky Ya-Sin from Temple, whose stock has been rising the past few weeks. Pretty good Senior Bowl, physical corner, good in press coverage. I think this pick makes sense for New Orleans. With the 63rd pick, the Kansas City Chiefs select Justice Hill, running back, Oklahoma State. Hill could go higher, however, he's quite undersized, and he's not super powerful, not necessarily a great power back, which is why I have him here at the end of the second round. However, he had a phenomenal combine, 4.4 flat 40-yard dash, 40-inch vertical. That's all you need to know. Super explosive playmaker. Yeah, the Chiefs need to improve their defense, but getting another playmaker alongside Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, Chris Conley, and Travis Kelce, this Chiefs offense is insane. And obviously their quarterback is the MVP in Patrick Mahomes. And then with the 64th pick, the New England Patriots select Tyree Jackson, quarterback, Buffalo. I've seen Jackson mainly going in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round of mock drafts. However, I expect him to have a good combine, and I think his stock will rise. I am a huge fan of him. Reminds me a lot of Josh Allen coming out of college last year. They're huge builds, super strong arm, and pretty mobile, but obviously accuracy is the big weakness. However, unlike Allen, Tyree Jackson will have multiple years, most likely, to sit behind Tom Brady, who's one of the greatest to ever do it, and get to learn from Mr. Brady. I think this is a great fit for both Tyree Jackson and New England, and I think the Patriots, with Tyree Jackson, can continue to be a good team once Tom Brady retires, which all of us Patriots haters, including myself, will not like this pick. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you are new for weekly 3-minute on the clock podcasts. I'm Mr. Octagonal, and I hope you have a great weekend.